Hello, welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at Swamp Thing Absolute Edition by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. Let's take a look. First thing I noticed when I got this in the mail was obviously, like any Absolute Edition, you've got a really cool slipcase. This one has a wraparound painted cover by Bernie Wrightson. But what really stood out is when you slip the book out, you've got this mossy texture on the book. Flip it over and you see this portrait of Swamp Thing with that mossy texture. I mean, that's gimmick covers at its best right there. Now, I'm unaware if the Alan Moore Absolute Editions have the same texture. I think they do, but I don't have those, so I can't say for sure. I have all those in trade paperback form from years ago. I would really like to replace them with the Absolutes to go along with this. I just haven't done it yet. So let's crack this open and take a look at some of the pages inside. You'll notice it has a really cool book design on the interiors too. This is something that DC excels at over Marvel, I have to say. I'm kind of a Marvel guy, but DC knows how to put these kind of books together. So as we look at the credits right here, written by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson, art by Bernie Wrightson, original series color by Bernie Wrightson, Glynis Oliver, and Tatiana Wood. Color restoration by Jose Villarubia. That is important because I discovered this book following Jose Villarubia on Instagram when he was showing his color restoration process. Again, something I will heavily criticize Marvel for is their lack of attention to detail when they do recolors for their omnibuses or just their reprints in general. I feel like the colors are really blown out. They don't take much thought into the fact that these were originally colored to be printed on newsprint. But DC does take that into consideration when they make these books. So they go through a pretty laborious recoloring process. So we're going to start with House of Secrets 92. I don't have an original of this to compare the colorings, but I do have this reprint from 1990. We'll kind of take a look to compare some stuff. So you can tell there's like a muted color palette here. Now this reprint, I believe, was recolored as well. But you can already see it's a tad brighter on the reprint as opposed to this. But this was Bernie Wrightson's original intent because Villarubia, he got the original copies and really studied the colors of the way it looked there and tried to reproduce it for a glossy page way better than what this did. Although this isn't awful, but there are some later ones that are a little bit more subjective. Obviously, you can see blue to purples. We'll come back in a second until we find some interesting pages. Now, this book only prints the Swamp Thing story from House of Secrets, which makes sense. It's a Swamp Thing book, right? Let's find that page. Whereas this reprint here in my hand has the whole issue. Even though everything's yellow here, they changed the dialogue boxes up, different colors. Now it's hard to say what they do as far as the page turns go. You can really see it there. So this reprint definitely tried to make Swamp Thing more green, whereas Wrightson apparently wanted it to have a more of a gray, muckish color originally. And the rest of this reprint is House of Secrets, not related to Swamp Thing. Colors are about the same, I think, on the covers because those were printed on glossy originally. Kind of flip through some pages here. beautiful Bernie Wrightson line work. I would say this is Bernie Wrightson under a deadline, as opposed to some of his passion projects that he had the clout to work on later in his career. I haven't really taken the time to read all of this yet. It is on my stack of things. So here's the image that was on the front cover as well. Just cropped in and made mossy. This moss almost gives it like some depth even. Stop. You have to stop on these splash pages. Really soak them in. All of these covers are just classic. Every time I see a Swamp Thing cover, it's like I've seen them all because people love them and they post them on Instagram all the time. And I mean, I've just seen them throughout the years. I've never had any though. I never collected this particular series. It was always something I wanted to read. So again, when I was seeing Jose show his recoloring stages, and as soon as this came out, I had to have it. This kind of breakdown the two characters. Arcane. Of course, Arcane was even used in the Alan Moore series, at least at the beginning. I mean, this stuff is just incredible. It's bad. I like how they kept the issue page numbering along with the total book numbering. It always bugs me in reprints when they take this numbering out. Another great transformation scene. Hitting the tropes. Last issue was essentially Frankenstein, and now we have a Wolfman. Look at that. It would be interesting to know. I would like to have the originals to see if the page turns, if they attempted to try to get them to lay out. That's always difficult in these things because they don't have ads. So unless you put blank pages in occasionally, it's going to mess up the page turn just naturally. So, but this seems like it would have been a page turn so that when you turn it, it's on this side and not this side. That's another thing that DC does better about that a lot of times. I have the DC Jack Kirby Fourth World Absolutes, and while they won't stick a blank page in the middle of an issue, they will do one towards the end. Instead of like putting a new cover on this side, they'll put it on this side so that at least the first page of a book is on this side. So I'd be interested to know if this had an ad right here in the original, or if it just said Swamp Thing like that. That would be nice to know. So see how they have the cover on this side. So if you were like opening a book, it would be like that. So it would be kind of neat if they had done something to where the cover was over here and you opened it up to this, but probably less important than the story page turns. Just the water. The waves crashing against the rock. That would be an underrated panel. You know, it doesn't have a character in it really, but just the detail of the waves. I mean, this looks like movement to me. I think with Wrightson, a lot of times it's figure work, and even though the figures are kind of condensed here, just the way they're positioned, like this person turning with their head, looking away, position of the baby, does a pretty good baby. A lot of artists struggle with babies and children. Tree out. So there's consistency with the cover always being over here. Now we're taking on a robot as opposed to another monster. Going through a Frankenstein, a werewolf, and a witch. This is great stuff. The background, clockmaker. I like that. It's clever. There we go. The Batman one. So now, after we've established this as a horror book, time to get into the superheroes. And who better than Batman? And these two characters work together surprisingly well. So this is where you can really tell that Bernie Wrightson kind of did it all. Len Wein writer, Bernie Wrightson illustrator, and then just Joe Orlando as the editor. Normally there's a couple more names along here. Like the letterer doesn't get credit here. So I wonder who did the lettering. This is a cool little Knight of the Bat insignia there, title. Bernie Wrightson would go on to do a Batman miniseries, The Cult, eventually. That's a classic. Batman with his cape in the wind, blowing that way. I always think it's funny that the length of Batman's cape is dependent on how cool do you want to make the image. Do you want to have his cape really billowing in the wind, or do you want to have him just standing with it draped down over him? And that's the beauty of like comics that movies cannot copy. Because if you saw this in live action, if his cape changed length from shot to shot, it would stand out because it's reality. But in comics, you get away with that. You're like, that looks cool, and that looks cool, and that looks cool. The old trench coat and fedora disguise. Works every time. Worked for Ben Grimm, it'll work for Swamp Thing. Another cool cape scene of it splayed out across him. And for it to fall like that, too. Again, these are all things that I feel like don't work in live action the way they work in comics. Oh, now we have the cover on this side. So that would mess up the page turn. So now we're going to have the first page over here. So I did pretty well through most of the book. Outer space. So Alan Moore wasn't the first to address outer space with Swamp Thing. That is a classic cover right there. That hand's oddly placed because initially I thought it was his hand. And I thought it was just weird perspective, and now I see it's another hand. That hand's a little odd there, but otherwise, obviously great picture there. Composition. Abby in a Vampirilla-esque swimsuit. As I flip through this, I realize I need to move this up in my reading queue. Like any good comic reader, though, I have a stack near the bed. It's really 2 stacks. It never seems to get smaller. I read a lot of comics with the kids, and I don't know if they would like this or not. Sometimes they think stuff like this is funny. Like they find Gollum in Lord of the Rings extremely funny. It's like, would they think that's funny or grotesque? I don't know. This isn't one I was planning on reading with them. It's kind of one I was going to read myself and then just have it available for them as they get a little older and want to explore it. But sometimes my best reading gets done with them because it's what I have time to do. I like the way the lettering is on the log right there. He almost looks a little Man-Thing-ish right there if he just had the nose, the snout hanging down. As much as I do like this, stuff like this, he just looks like a naked body as opposed to like a mossy creature. Whereas on this cover, it definitely looks like a swamp creature there. But here he's just a little too smooth sometimes. That's one of those things, how the character just develops over time. And I'm sure some of that was deadline initiated too. He had to come up with a way to draw it fast. If he spent his whole time drawing it like he did the covers, I mean, who knows? He probably wouldn't have made the deadlines that he made. He already put so much detail into stuff like this. It's like wow you with the monsters of the month. And you just let the feature monster keep the feature monster kind of simple. Starting to wind down, number 12. Now I get to fight some dinosaurs. Cavemen. So I look forward to reading this. The Alan Moore Swamp Thing run is one of my favorite runs in comics in general. I just never took the time to like buy one of the trade paperbacks of this series. I don't know why. It was just always on the back burner. I guess after you read 7 volumes of the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, you're just kind of like, okay, I've read enough Swamp Thing for a little while. And then you start reading other stuff and just don't get back to it. But yeah, this edition is definitely worth picking up. If you're a Swamp Thing fan, if you're a DC fan, if you're a Bernie Wrightson fan, any of those reasons. If you're just a comics fan and you just want something, you know, this is an iconic little run right here of comics. Historic, beautiful art, fun, you know, kind of horror stories. Let's look at the back matter. See what we got in the back. Not a whole lot. Now, this would have been nicer. This interview is probably pretty good. Usually that stuff's pretty good. Who is it with? Alan Weiss, Louise Simonson, and Michael and Kaluta. So they're kind of giving their takes on knowing Bernie Wrightson and Len Wein. So I'm sure this is a good interview, but man, I would have liked to have seen some of these blown up bigger. Oh, here we go. I love looking at this stuff. The original pencils. There's always something lost. Even, I mean, the covers less so because the covers were printed on higher quality paper, but the pages themselves, like here we go, that same image, just to see it in black and white like this. And again, see, these are all cool. I wish that they had a full page each. That's where those artist editions come in. So an artist edition of this would just be incredible. I don't know if they have one. At least we're getting these covers blown up. I think the first time I saw one too and saw that these titles were pasted up was kind of a revelation for me. I thought they were drawn on every single time. Some early sketches, roughs. Beautiful back matter. At least they did pick some good pages to blow up full size. Well, that one would have been nice too. I like the roughs too. Well, that's going to do it for this book. Definitely one I would recommend getting. Still available right now. I'll put some links in the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, read your comics.